I respectfully but very strongly disagree with the President's decision to invoke Section 232 to impose massive tariffs on steel and aluminum. First of all, I don't think there is any national security related predicate need established that would even invoke this. Secondly, I think this puts far more American jobs in jeopardy than it could possibly save. We've got far more American jobs that involve making things with steel and aluminum, which are themselves fungible commodities traded in international markets. Far more people are employed in America making or selling things that involve steel or aluminum as inputs than we do people who are making steel and aluminum. Moreover, with steel, for example, we can satisfy all of our national security needs with just 3% of domestic steel output, just domestic steel output. That makes it almost impossible, in my mind, to establish the predicate need to invoke Section 232 in the first place. Look, I believe that there are no winners in a trade war, only losers. And I say this as the grandson of a Treasury man, a T-man, one of the few law enforcement officers that existed back in the 1930s and 40s, were the T-men. My grandfather helped enforce the Smoot-Hawley Trade Tariff Act, and he bemoaned the fact that that had been his job for years. Late in life, he used to experience guilt over it. I mean, it was his job. He was just doing his job. But he used to warn me that that's one of the things that you just don't do. It's like never fight a land war in Asia and don't start a trade war, because they tend to result in, or at least exacerbate, global depressions. So I want to keep us out of trade wars. I think it's a mistake to start going down this road, and I hope the President will reconsider. These are conversations I've had with the President, both before and since he's made the decision to invoke Section 232.
What is Congress doing about this right now? Is a non-binding resolution, does that amount to a hill of beans?
It's not nothing, but it's not nearly sufficient. As you point out, I mean, it's a little bit like the unarmed English Bobby, who, being unarmed upon seeing the commission of a crime, might say, stop, or I'll yell stop again, this time more harshly. What we need is something binding. What we need is to look to the example of 1980. In 1980, President Carter, with a Democratic Congress in place, slapped some 232 tariffs on petroleum imports. Congress, a Democratic Congress, in both the House and the Senate, said no and passed legislation to undo that action. President Carter vetoed that action. Both houses of Congress then overrode that veto. That's the kind of thinking we need to be involved in. That's exactly what we need to do.
Bob Corker gave a speech about a month ago, I believe, that was on the question of tariffs, and he put it in the context of, we don't pass anything here. We don't pass amendments. We don't do any, what the hell are we doing? If we actually voted on this, it would pass. If we had an actual sense of the Senate, more than a non-binding resolution, it would probably pass, and yet it doesn't get offered. What is going on with that?
It's a problem. This is supposed to be the world's greatest deliberative legislative body. I'm not even sure what that means anymore. But what it's supposed to mean is that it's a place with theoretically unlimited debate. It's a place where anyone can offer up an amendment. Anyone can offer up legislation and have it voted on. And not just gimmicky legislation, not just something that expresses the sense of the Senate in some abstract way, but actual legislation. That's what we need to do. And we especially need to do that here in the area of trade.
It just feels like Congress has been in a long, pretty steady descent in terms of abdicating its responsibility on any number of things. I mean, just pass a budget. Can we pass a normal budget with appropriation bills and things like that? You came into the Senate as a reformer, as a young voice. You were a Tea Party guy back when there was a Tea Party, and you toppled the establishment, bringing some energy and some kick into the place, partly from a sense of we need to have more rich oversight over the executive branch. What's going on? Why is it just, are the incentives so strong to not do anything and just have a single up and down vote on a omnibus bill at the end of the year? What explains the way it doesn't work?
It's the drive for perpetual re-election. That's at the center of
even
so
every
much of
6 years re-election.
Washington. Yes, exactly. But the more members of Congress can avoid making difficult decisions, the easier it is for members of Congress, whether they're in the House or the Senate, Republican or Democrat, the easier it is for them to achieve perpetual re-election. And so that's why you've seen this odd confluence of events. You've seen the centralization of power, power being taken from the people, moved to Washington. But then within Washington, there's a second step where the power is transferred from the people's elected lawmakers in the House and Senate over to unelected, unaccountable bureaucrats in the executive branch who are not accountable to anyone. They're not accountable to the voters through election. They're not really even, most of the time, accountable to anyone who is in turn accountable to the people through election. This is bad for everyone else, but it's good for a small handful of politicians who find that this process makes it easier for them to get reelected. And it's bad for the American people. It is, by the way, very good for a small handful of experts in Washington, D.C., who become wealthy off of the complexity that surrounds Washington, D.C. You raised a related point, by the way, in referring to the way we spend money, by the way we pass appropriations bills. More often than not, we don't have a regular process in which individual members are allowed to craft legislation or change the way that our spending bills are put together. We're instead given a pile of papers, sometimes a couple thousand pages long, a few hours before the expiration of a spending deadline. That's wrong. When there's no opportunity for debate, for discussion, for amendment, for individual members to improve it, you've effectively disenfranchised almost 300 million Americans. Unless you're one of those lucky 4 members, named perhaps Ryan, Pelosi, McConnell, or Schumer, then you're being shut out of the process. That's not right.